My dissertation title is More Than English, Karen Refugees Negotiating Their Lifestyle in a Cosmopolitan City. Who, where, and why? So I looked at a minority ethnic group called the Karen from Burma. And they were ousted by the government, and they lived in the refugee camps in Thailand for about 10 years. They're mainly farmers, and they lived in the rural area of Thailand for 10 years. So life is a lot different when they come here or come to Chicago. They get selected by UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. They get interviewed, and then they go to different countries such as Australia, US, Japan, and Canada. Let's see here. Okay, this is a mouthful, so I'm not going to read it or anything. But I think what I want to take from this is that research question was basically, they come here with this idea that English is a way to increase their social mobility. However, how can they do it in a neoliberal society as Chicago? And my argument says that it's really more than English. There's a type of culture that is embedded in the language that they need to better understand so that they can better, well, I don't know if I should say better understand, but it's just very hard for them to overcome a lot of obstacles to a successful resettlement. Theoretical framework, cultural capitalism and neoliberalism. I use two theories. I try to intertwine neoliberalism more as the environment. I don't know if Professor McCarthy remembers this book, of course. He assigns it all the time. So, and then cultural capitalism is Pierre Bourdieu's work. And then methodology, ethnographic case study, writing narratives, and a case study because I'm looking at one particular community in Chicago. So now, the twists and turns. I would like to say, one of the interesting things as going through a dissertation is that when you do your prelim, like you have these assumptions that you make, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna, use neoliberalism, and I'll have this neoliberal lens, and and then I'm like, I create these questions that all of a sudden come up in my mind for research questions in the prelim. Like, I say, how do Karen refugees adapt to a neoliberal lifestyle when their background does not consist of living a life of capitalism? And then I'm like, after I did my study, I'm like, wait, capitalism is almost everywhere somehow. Why did I say that? That was like the weirdest thing. So I just wanted to say that your research question is going to change. It's going to morph into different stages, and it will become clearer to you later. Understanding my theoretical framework. I'm honest because I'm done, right? So I'm still unclear as to what I used. I don't really understand. I understand neoliberalism to a certain extent, but really I didn't really know how I used it. Sometimes when you live in here, Urbana-Champaign or Chicago, you think everything is neoliberalism in some way, like something dealing with capitalism, right? But really, it's just because you see something doesn't mean that it's. Just because you say it's neoliberalism doesn't mean it is neoliberalism, or cultural capitalism or whatever. And I overlaid my framework. I mentioned neoliberalism and cultural capitalism almost in every sentence in my data. So that was kind of weird. It was really weird. I don't know how. I was trying to use it, but I was trying to force my way into using theories to explain certain phenomenon. Accept rejection and move on. I get rejected from going to refugee agencies and community centers, but I learned that people, in a sense, we take advantage of each other. Not to be pessimistic. So when I go to the refugee agency, I said, okay, what do you guys need from me so that I can do my study? I didn't say that directly, but really, I basically became a tutor. Right? They used me as a tutor. I used them as observation. Right? So I don't want to say in a pessimistic way, but to get your foot in the door somewhere, you kind of have to give, right? Give something to get something. I don't know. Ethnography, really dependent on the researcher. I want to say that it's very, sometimes it's very subjective. What I say today might not pertain to what you're going to do in the future, right? Ethnography is just a story that you kind of experience and you tell it out to the people. And so, what I say is not going to maybe not pertain, but really, I mean, I don't want you guys to feel, when you're doing your dissertation, to feel lost or to feel like, am I doing this the right way? Because of course there's no real right way. It's just, or maybe there's a right way depending on your advisor, right? So, language barrier I had was the Karen don't speak my language, which is Thai. They lived in Thailand for 10 years, but they lived in the camps. So, and English is their, it's sort of like their second, third language. And so it was just hard communicating with them. And I wasn't sure what, they might say one thing one day and then they say something another day. And I'm like, should I be writing what they say that first day or the second day, So it's just a little bit, validity is a little bit off, but but I'm done, so it's okay. I mean, eventually you find your way and you find the stories and the commonality comes about, so. Environment is different than doing classwork. So what I'm trying to say is that when you're doing classwork, you're giving a syllabus and you follow the syllabus. But when you're actually, when you're free, like a bird, you don't know where you're flying, basically. You've got your qual exam, you got your prelims, you got your dissertation. So you're basically on your own. And I want everybody to think that, you got to be very ambitious every day. You got to think about your dissertation every day, kind of like it's your kid or your child or your baby or something. Yeah. So that's my tip, just to be very excited about your dissertation somehow. Every day. I mean, you're excited the first day, but then after that, it's downhill. Oh, sorry. I think I got this. No, I don't. Hang on. Jay, how do I get to the last slide? Yeah. Okay, great. My biggest problem or issue with the dissertation was linking the stories together. As you can see, I'm like gardening with a young female Karen, went to the Art Institute with a young male Karen, observed 3 Karen refugees, but there's 2 in there and there's a ESL teacher. And this is the hallway of a classroom. And then it was New Year's and I gave a cake to a Karen at Starbucks. So all these different environments, and I'm like, I remember I gave my advisor like 200 plus pages of data. And then I'm like, she's like, how do we, this is so raw, this is not, I put it in my data in my dissertation, and it was just too raw for her to read. And we came up with 7 themes at first to work on, and then it boiled down to 3 themes. So you're going to find, if you're doing ethnographic work, that it's just going to be very messy. Because there's just going to be so many stories for you to tell, and you're going to have to try to put it, organize it in a way. And you're going to have to stress yourself a little bit. I was under the pressure because I wanted to graduate this semester, and it was just, I was like, oh, when I first gave all my data to my advisor, she was like, wow, how am I going to read all this? And now we finally got it down to 3 themes. It was like less than 100 pages of data. So there was a lot of cutting and pasting and a lot of hope to be done. So that's it, though. I don't have anything else. Thank you. Do you guys have any questions or anything to talk about?
So actually, I invented that title, Twists and Turns in Dissertating.
Yes, thank you.
But somehow it shaped or framed Chai's train of thought. But actually, the point is really to open up for us to kind of have a discussion. It was supposed to be a lunch discussion. Now it's after lunch discussion. I have the question. I actually have many questions. So we will guide him to talk about his experiences of writing a dissertation by asking questions. So you said that kind of you went into this research community or this research base, these people, and so it's a kind of like you are taking advantage of each other using your word, like so you use them as research participant, but they use you as a tutor. So is there a kind of like subjectivity or positionality that you have to consider when you are doing your research? Or is ethnographic case study is really your methodology, because then actually you are doing kind of an action, right?
Sounds like action, but I was a participant observer in some way. So I think that's part of ethnography too. But yeah, I think like, it's from my experience.
Right, so my question would be, how did you decide you are going to use an ethnographic case study?
Oh, I mean, in qualitative methods, you kind of, it's kind of in that area, like narrative, and I'm looking at a culture in some way, and case study because they are a community. But really, it's no real like technique about it. It's not like quantitative, you don't use like a formula or something, right? So you kind of, ethnographic or narrative writing can be kind of related to all kinds of qualitative ways, like action research as well, right? But I don't know, ethnographic because I'm looking at a particular, like I'm being with the community, participating in their parties or their learning experiences in Chicago, going out with them, as you can see, and having fun. So, it's a lot of, that's a lot, but that's what ethnography is kind of what it's about. Action research, I think, from my training with Nofsky is a lot of like, well, you're improving each time. You're sort of writing down like certain things every day in every classroom situation, or I don't know if it doesn't have to be just classroom, right? But and you learn from the improvement of it in some ways, right? And you keep on.
Okay, so I think one thing to need to clarify is, so you said that when you are tutoring them, but you don't take that as a research.
I do take it as research too.
Right.
Yeah, I do that. So you're right. I mean, there's like action research, I think. I don't know if I should have called it action research ethnography. But I mean, I write about like my experiences with them outside of the classroom too, outside the ESL or outside learning English as well. So.
Yeah, interesting. So. Yeah.
So these were the three themes that emerged
eventually at the end.
And can you just say a little bit about like what were in those themes? Like why were they three distinct themes? How did they work for you?
These three themes are like giant umbrellas for me. Like living in America, what was I thinking? Well,
that's from their point of view? That would be something that
it's from their stories and my point of view. Their stories gave me a certain point of view. So you remember that the young man I was talking about in the art museum? I took him to the supermarket, and he's never been to a supermarket at that time it was Dominic's, now it's closed down, but in Chicago. And we were walking, and he was looking at rolls of toilet paper aisle, and there were all these brands and different like packaging, and he didn't understand why. Like he was nodding his head. I'm like, what's wrong, Paul? His name is Paul. He's like, why is there so many decisions to make? Because he grew up in a refugee camp, and so toilet paper was toilet paper, but when you go.
Which category did that one go in?
That was in living in America, was I thinking, because and it's not just America, but any cosmopolitan city like Chicago, when you're coming from that background, you're going to get stressed out of making like all these decisions. Education for survival another story about him, the GED. So basically, Paul did his high school education in the refugee camps. But when he comes here, he's like 19. College is like on his mind. But then there's this barrier that he can't, and it's like he has to take English, right, ESL. But also, his high school diploma is not recognized by the universities in Chicago. But I had to sort of find a way to get him for it to be recognized. And so we went to Truman College, which is a Chicago city college or a community college. And they have a program called Gateway to College for him to, and for many others to take college credit at the same time do ESL. So eventually he collects college credit to a certain level, amount where he can transfer to a university. So it kind of worked out. So, but if I wasn't there to guide him, he would have been stuck trying to pass the GED, and eventually many do not maybe, and a lot of people need to work to establish themselves, and with work it gets too complicated. Life gets too complicated to go back to school. Linking the past to the present, when I all these people that I meet, I talk about, I asked about their past, and I eventually just put it in my data as to how their past kind of relates to the problems they see in the present.
So sorry, maybe you said this, but then what was your goal? Was it about your interaction with them, or was it about their stories, or about what did you set out to do?
Well, my argument is that to show that it's more than English. There's just a lot of factors, or cultural. Okay, in regards to Pierre Bourdieu, he says that cultural capital is like a stock of cultural values that make you who you are today. So maybe there is a lack of cultural values I'm showing, or because they are living in this neoliberal context, and neoliberal or capitalism or whatever context, this present day of capitalistic context they're trying to survive in. I'm trying to show, or I don't know, I should say illuminate, or trying to give an understanding for other researchers or people who are studying this particular, either this particular ethnic group coming here, or they can relate it to other refugee groups as well, if that makes sense. Hey, Georgianne, yes?
Can you speak to how this is the process of the dissertation, but the process specifically to your committee, your relationship to your committee, the relationship your committee to your committee, and how you juggle that, or maybe strategies for us to succeed with that?
PhD is for me. It feels like the P stands for like personal. It's kind of like very. You're very individual. You're very individual. You're a researcher, right? And so you're a bit free to do what you have to do, but then you have to go back to your advisor. And I, living in Chicago, and doing this work in Chicago, my advisor is here, so I would Skype back and forth, and so, yeah, the committee. I had a committee member in Thailand, and I had a committee. I had two other committee members, and I mean, people are just busy, and so it's just. I'm not saying everybody cares about each other, but I'm just saying you're pretty much doing your own thing, and not really on your own, but you got to make decisions, and you can't hold hands with people like all the time. You're working on your own. You've got to have your own ambitions. You gotta, wake up and just smell the coffee and go right to work. That's how it is. Is that right? Or is that wrong? Is that did I answer that, or?
What comes in my mind as we talk about entrepreneurship and skills and how we're creating a new education curriculum and those types of things, but and maybe sometimes more pessimistic or critical. And then I always get back to, it's almost like we're acting as our own entrepreneurs, and just hearing you you know, we have to make decisions, we have to create, we have to decide,
Sounds like a business thing, right?
Yeah, I know. So.
Sorry, I know that might be my mindset nowadays.
You said you're a researcher. You said you're another.
Well, I'm trying to decide what the difference is. This is a larger question.
I'm sorry, it kind of crosses over, so either.
No, sorry.
Neoliberal researcher.
Neoliberal.
I think it's important.
I had a question.
Yeah, sure.
It's sort of a three-part question.
Okay.
So it's all about theory. So I want to know, how did you decide your theoretical route, whether that's from your coursework or your conversation? Out of all the things that you chose, how did you decide that route?
That's a good question. Can I answer that right now before I kind of mess up or forget? Okay, so through Professor McCarthy's class too, I took I like the neoliberal, what you taught about it, and so I was like, oh, I need to use this somehow, some way, and it's GSE is a lot about neoliberalism in some ways, so it's like, okay, let's use it. I could have used a bunch of different theories. I mean, theories in some ways just kind of explain or try to help you understand why certain issues come about, or why people don't understand why certain people act a certain way, right? And it's, yes, influenced by coursework, influenced by professors, influenced by department, basically. And cultural capitalism was influenced by a colleague. A colleague of mine was doing something on cultural capitalism on higher access to education. So and neoliberalism to me felt more, for my stuff, felt more like the environment, whereas cultural capitalism was sort of like the explanation of what they lacked in this environment. And so that's what kept, it was hard for them to become first-rate citizens because of this and that in regards to cultural capitalism and how they are challenged by neoliberal, context. Does that answer your question? Or? Okay.
Yeah, so a follow-up question to that. So ethnographic case study or qualitative study or qualitative research in general is more of like you learn from the experiences of the people, right? That are researched. But then here you have these theories influenced by coursework, by department, by professors,
colleagues.
So I feel like, how did you make that transition? Like, you are not coming in with these theories. Like, how these theories actually speak to the research?
I was really lost, because I was getting like my advisors and my people on my committee are like, you're not supposed to do it like that. Like the theories, like using the theories in some ways that I was pushing to say, we can explain maybe Paul's issue with the toilet paper because there's this neoliberal or capitalistic ideology of marketing and all the people trying to mass produce certain or companies trying to sell and make more profit and whatever, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. It wasn't supposed to be that way for some reason, and I tried to lay it off a little bit on the theory. What happened was the theory was leading me, and that was not. I don't think that was good, because it was just like I was like looking at like whatever Pierre Bourdieu or David Harvey said. I was like looking in their framework, and that's not original. You want to be original. You want to look at do your work. You have to do your work before you listen. You can use the theories as sort of a guideline, but don't let the theories lead you, is what I'm trying to say. And it led me, and that was my biggest mistake. And going back to my dissertation, reflecting on it, yeah, it's not great, but it can be better. I can do better on it, but nothing is perfect, is what I'm trying to say. And you won't finish if you keep on looking for perfectionism. So.
I mean, you sort of answered my second question, was how did you maintain your theoretical posture, even though you're in this flux?
Yeah, I don't think I had a posture. I was slouching all the time, like I was like on my desk, like Yeah, but you're right. I don't know if I answered it. Or, okay.
My last question is, then what are you planning on, how are you going to build from your experience in being more comfortable with your theory, not leading you, but you develop home yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I'm in the aftermath now. It's all done. It's already, deposited. So now I'm at the point where I'm talking to my advisor about, presenting parts of it to AERA and doing journals and stuff. And I think just going back and, whenever you read others' work, there's like different interpretations that they didn't even know, right? Same for, if you're reading your own work. You're going to interpret things differently, and, it'll eventually be better, maybe, I guess. Could be worse, but either way, you're learning, right? You're learning from what you've done, so.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, sure.
I just have a question specifically about working with Karen and working with a population that language was an issue, communication was an issue.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how you chose Karen, and did you think that they would speak more Thai than they did, or were you assuming that English was going to be the medium of your research, or do you have any recommendations for thinking about working with populations where there might be a language difference?
I think the situation chose me in some ways. So 4 or 5 years ago, I was on a panel I was attending the CIES, Comparative International Education Society or something, yeah. I was a comparative education major at Loyola at the time. And it was, I was actually doing something on Singapore. I was doing another, like a thesis on Singapore, not dealing anything with refugees or Karen. But I had someone that was wanted me to be on their panel and wanted me to talk about something in regards to Thailand. So it just found me, like the journal. There was a journal about the Karen refugees in the CIE Comparative Education Journal. And it just, I just said, oh, okay, I'll do a literature review and I'll talk about citizenship, looking at the theories of citizenship and that. And then I presented in Thailand about it, and then all of a sudden it just became part of me. I still wanted to do something more on Singapore. I was interested in compulsory education. And when I got here, I tried to do like papers on Singapore, but eventually for me to actually do field work and do, being my time and my situation, it got to the point where I chose, the Karen refugees, and it worked out. So it's kind of like the situation chose me more, and I had to be very flexible. It wasn't like my first choice, but eventually it became a masterpiece here. So.
Child.
I'm sorry?
Become your child.
My child, yeah. I didn't really choose my child. It just came, it was just born. It just came out of its womb. And I looked at it.
I'm wondering, like, the challenges of them learning English and you having to do the research in English, do you have any suggestions for those of us who might find ourselves in similar situations? Did you often use translators?
I did. I had to use a translator.
Every time?
I couldn't do it every time. I was running out of money and stuff. It was time. I was running out of time. I mean, you couldn't, the translators don't always have time, and you kind of have to use body language sometimes, and you kind of have to use the broken English, kind of very easy, simple English for them to kind of understand. I mean, I was fortunate there were a couple that could speak Thai, and I was able to get good information, but it was very hard for the people that, but they're learning English at the same time, and so I was getting some information from them too, with the broken English and the issues of translating, lost in translation.
Do you think there's a difference in your data between the data that you got in Karen with the translator, the one you did with just you in English, the ones that you got to do in Thai?
Yeah, you know, that's a good thought. Yeah, I think I did have a lot of different, like, yeah, because, okay, well, the translator, I had one translator that only, you know, also speak like a little bit of broken English, but pretty fluent enough for me to kind of get stuff down. But you know, the Thai translator and the Thai translator helped me a lot because then I can understand fully. And there was also one, she down there, right? She speaks good English, so English translation was really good too. So, yeah, there's a big difference between getting the, you know, having issues with translation and having fluent translation. Does that answer your question? I mean, yeah, because then I feel more valid. Like my data is more valid with the, you know, the fluent translation. Whether in Thai, perfect Thai or perfect English, I felt better. I felt a lot better. Oh, I wrote, you know, this is what they really feel like, and you know, yeah. So, yeah.
Like being brought out in either theory or methodology just about language and or you know different like meaning making. I mean, I think
Yeah.
because you have an interview less than perfect English, or it's what they are able to communicate to you as an English instructor. So the dynamic there, I think that this is not necessarily like a flawed model.
Yeah, sorry.
Or maybe yeah.
No.
Or no, I think it would be interesting to read about like a fluent instructor having a discussion with students who's learning English and what they can